This week on Vatican Connections, reactions from the church officials on the U.S. elections, the Pope celebrates a Jubilee with prisoners, and we begin to prepare for the end of the Year of Mercy. Hello and welcome, I'm Emily Callan. The search for greater unity between Christians is a long journey, and on Thursday the topic of ecumenical dialogue was at the forefront of an audience between the Pope and members and ecumenical experts of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, who have been participating in a plenary session since November 8th. The theme for their assembly looks at what model of full communion. In the Clementine Hall, the Holy Father addressed the members and warned them against false models of unity. In the course of this year, I had the opportunity to live many significant ecumenical meetings, the Pope began, and remembered his recent trip to Sweden for the commemoration of the Protestant Reformation. Each one of these meetings was a source of consolation, where he was able to see, he says, that the desire for communion is alive and intense. He went on to say that Christian unity is essential and is something Jesus prayed for, as we see in the Gospel of John. May they be brought to perfection as one, that the world may know that you sent me, and that the love with which you loved me may be in them and I in them. The Holy Father insisted that closeness between Christians comes from a personal conversion and communal conversion to Christ. But he warned them of three false models of communion. The first, the belief that unity comes only through human effort. Rather, it is a gift which requires patient expectations, tenacity, effort, and commitment, said the Pope. Though there may be conflict, joy comes when presumptions are set aside, and we all recognize ourselves in need of God's love, which draws people into communion. The second misconception, that unity is not uniformity. To ignore the diversity between different Christian traditions is to ignore the Holy Spirit. Instead, the Holy Father argues that the continuation of such differences must not paralyze us, but push us to seek together the way to address such obstacles successfully. Finally, his third warning, unity is not absorption. While recognizing what unites Christians, ecumenism is true when it is able to move our attention away from ourselves, from our argumentations and formulations, said the Pope, and turn us to the Word of God, which exacts being listened to, received, and witnessed in the world. In his catechesis this week, the Holy Father once again focused on the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, this time on visiting the sick and the imprisoned. Continuing his series for the last weeks of this Jubilee year, Pope Francis also recalled his time with the prisoners during their Jubilee last weekend, saying the imprisoned are in need of closeness and tenderness, and admired their desire to find healing. Even in prison, they prayed and evangelized, he said. Here is a synopsis of his catechesis.
Chi è malato spesso si sente solo. Non possiamo nascondere che soprattutto ai nostri giorni, proprio nella malattia, si fa esperienza più profonda della solitudine che attraversa gran parte della vita. Una visita può far sentire la persona malata meno sola, e un po' di compagnia è un'ottima medicina. Non lasciamo sole le persone malate. Non impediamo loro di trovare sollievo e a noi di essere arricchiti per la vicinanza a chi soffre. Alla stessa stregua penso a quanti sono rinchiusi in carcere. Gesù non ha dimenticato neppure loro. Ponendo la visita ai carcerati tra le opere di misericordia, ha voluto invitarci anzitutto a non farci giudici di nessuno. Certo, se uno è in carcere è perché ha sbagliato, non ha rispettato la legge e la convivenza civile, perciò in prigione sta scontando la sua pena. Ma qualunque cosa un carcerato possa aver fatto, egli rimane pur sempre amato da Dio. Non cadiamo nell'indifferenza, ma diventiamo strumenti della misericordia di Dio. Tutti noi possiamo essere strumenti della misericordia di Dio e questo ci farà bene, più bene a noi che agli altri, perché la misericordia passa attraverso un gesto, una parola, una visita. È un atto per restituire gioia e dignità a chi l'ha perduta. Grazie.
The United States elected their new president last Tuesday. President-elect Donald Trump will be taking over the Oval Office, and church leaders and officials have words of encouragement as he steps into his new role. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Vatican Secretary of State, made this statement. I think, first of all, we must note with respect the will expressed by the American people in this exercise of democracy that they tell me was also characterized by a large voting turnout. And then we give our best wishes to the new president so that his government can be really fruitful. And also, we assure him of our prayers so that the Lord may enlighten him and support him in the service of his country, and of course, also in serving the well-being and peace of the world. I think that today there is a need for everyone to work to change the world situation that is one of severe laceration and of serious conflict. The president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Archbishop Joseph E. Kurtz, expressed his thoughts as well in an interview with Christopher Wells on Vatican Radio. After a long and divisive election, he asked about the Archbishop's hopes moving forward.
Well, first of all, as we all know, for Catholics, for people of goodwill, for people of faith, an election is very, very important because it assists a country, a nation, in seeking within their own area the common good, the good of the human person, a good that respects the dignity of every person. Last year, Pope Francis, of course, came to the United States, and both in Congress, at the White House, and then in Philadelphia at the World Meeting of Families, he reiterated how important is engagement and involvement in the political process. So while, of course, we do not endorse specific candidates, we seek the common good, and we bring to bear our Catholic social teaching and the principles that mark a direction that promotes the common good. So this morning, now that the election is completed, we are, of course, eager to be able to welcome our new president and all the new elected officials, so that we'll be eager to work closely with President Trump as well as both houses of Congress as we seek to really promote the good of all. And our hope would be to be able to do that as we've done now as a conference for, darn near 100 years.
Archbishop Kurtz, you mentioned, of course, that the Church is not in the business of endorsing particular candidates. Nonetheless, over the course of the past years and decades, the conference especially and individual bishops have spoken up and brought to people's attention different kinds of issues. What are some of the issues that are still important that we need to focus on as we welcome this new leadership and returning leadership in our country?
Well, we've done, I think, a commendable job in presenting a vision and a path forward in forming consciences for faithful citizenship. This is a document that has been issued a number of times. It has just been revised, actually about a year ago, and presented. And it gives somewhat of a direction forward. You won't be surprised to know that we begin looking at the common good by protecting the human person, human life from the very moment of conception to the natural death. We look for opportunities for all people to be able to live fully their lives. And, of course, we have special resolve for brothers and sisters who are migrants and refugees, that we strongly believe they can be humanely welcomed without sacrificing our security. I'll mention two other issues, and one dear to us is addressing violent persecution that's threatening fellow Christians and people of other faiths throughout the world. We need to stand with them and provide ways to protect them. And then, of course, the great issues regarding domestic religious liberty, ensuring many, many issues, not the least of which is the truth about our families, about a family based on marriage of one man and one woman. So new beginnings, but many, many issues that we will be bringing to the fore with the new administration.
And can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
In many ways, this was a very divisive election. You saw some of that in debates people had and in conversations people had throughout the country. What do you see as some of the challenges going forward after a long and hard-fought campaign?
Well, it's correct that there has been a lot of division, and it will take all of our energy, and especially calling forth the best of our leaders and the best of all the people to put aside a divisiveness of Democrat or Republican or any other political party, and really, in our view, see the face of Christ in our neighbors, especially the people who are suffering, and even those who disagree with us. I hope that the Church can be somewhat a beacon, leading that by the way we as a Church model the notion of civility, as we seek to stand with our truth, but to do so always in charity.
And do you think do you think there's some significance to the fact that this election and this campaign took place during the Year of Mercy, which has significance around the world?
Well, of course, I'm glad that we're mentioning the Year of Mercy, which we're very, very close to completing. What a gift it has been, and we can draw on the Year of Mercy as a path forward in the way in which we look on the way we treat one another. I always say that mercy is really the love of God when it touches the heart of someone who's imperfect. That's all of us. And so in the political arena, this is especially true, that we don't sacrifice our convictions, of course, but in bringing forth our convictions, we always do so by proposing and not imposing, and by seeking to bring out the best of the person next to us. I think that's the way of not only receiving God's mercy, but sharing that mercy with our brothers and sisters.
Archbishop Kurtz, thank you very much. Do you have any final words for American Catholics, for Americans, for the rest of the world who's listening in on this conversation?
Well, I may say that every election brings an opportunity for a new beginning. Some people may right now be wondering, well, can our country come back and reconcile into a unity that we can work together and fulfill a promise of what we might call a more perfect unity? But the hope of Christ, I think, motivates people of faith to be able to join with people of goodwill and other people of faith, other voices of faith, in being able to take advantage, if you would, of this new beginning and see it as a new opportunity, a time that we might seek a falling out of violence and a rising of civility in our public discourse.
Archbishop Kurtz, thank you very, very much.
The Vatican was recently informed of illegal episcopal ordinations of priests in China from the unofficial community of the Catholic Church. On Monday, Vatican spokesperson Greg Burke clarified the standpoint of the Vatican on this matter in a statement, saying that such episcopal ordinations would constitute a grave violation of canonical norms. The Holy See hopes that such reports are baseless, he continued, and that they are waiting for sure documentation to evaluate the cases. Finally, he concluded that it is not licit to proceed with any episcopal ordination without the necessary papal mandate, even by appealing to particular beliefs. The ordination of bishops in China is a source of conflict between the country and the Vatican, and so at this moment what we can do is pray for this situation and especially pray for the Church in China. The imprisoned have been close to the Pope's heart since the beginning of his pontificate. In many of his apostolic voyages, he makes it a point to visit them. In the first few years following his election, he celebrated Holy Thursday in prisons near Rome and washed the feet of inmates. And so in Rome last weekend, nearly 4,000 people gathered for the Jubilee of prisoners. 1,000 of them, detainees from 12 countries, though most of them from Italy, were joined by family members, those working in prison ministry or prison staff and officials. Some of the detainees participated in special ways in the liturgy as altar servers or as part of the choir, and the Pope gave a homily and offered them a message of hope. This hope is found in God, who raises from the dead. Pope Francis spoke first of the martyrs who, though they were tortured and suffered, they kept this hope alive. Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke, he is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So the Pope stressed that hope is being born to a new life, which we must make our own. Hope is also a gift from God, he added, and we must ask for it. Whatever a person may be going through, there is no corner of our heart that cannot be touched by God's love. The Holy Father understood that losing one's freedom is the worst part of serving time in prison for a wrong we have done. But hope must not falter, he insisted, because God never tires of waiting for the Son to return, or of looking for the lost sheep until he finds it. And so hope in God's mercy invites us to keep looking ahead, the Pope continued, and to overcome our attachment to evil and sin. He affirmed the Church's duty to awaken the desire for true freedom within each person. Everyone makes mistakes. All are capable of it. Yet all also have the capacity to change. And so Pope Francis exhorted them to never allow themselves to be held captive by the past, and to never yield to the temptation of thinking that we cannot be forgiven. Sometimes forgiveness seems impossible, wounds too deep to overcome. However, the Holy Father reminded them that only God's power, His mercy, can heal. He concluded his homily by pointing to the statue of Mary holding chains displayed in the Basilica for the Mass, and asked for her intercession, that their hearts may experience the power of hope for new life, one worthy of being lived in complete freedom and in service to others. This weekend, another and final Jubilee will take place at the Vatican, a Jubilee for the socially excluded. Again, close to 6,000 people in precarious situations are spending close to 3 days in Rome, and their program includes a meeting with the Holy Father in Pope Paul VI Hall, catechesis sessions and prayer, a vigil at the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, and finally a Mass with Pope Francis in St. Peter's Basilica on Sunday. And that same day, holy doors across the world will be closing, leaving us 1 week away from the official end of the Jubilee Year of Mercy. In this next segment, Matteo Cioffi gives us more details on the closing of these doors and what we can expect on the last day of the Jubilee Year at St. Peter's Basilica.
Ten days left before the conclusion of this Year of Mercy. On November 20th, last Sunday of the liturgical year and the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ the King, Pope Francis will close the Holy Door in St. Peter Basilica. A week early, this Sunday, November 13th, all the other holy doors across the world will be closed in the diocese. That includes the door in the other three papal basilica, St. John Lateran, St. Paul outside the wall and St. Mary Major. The ritual will take place this coming Sunday. The papal delegates closing each door are the Vicar, Cardinal Agostino Vallini, who will lead the ceremony at St. John's Lateran, Cardinal Santos Abrile Castello, Archpriest of the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major, who will lead the ceremony in that basilica, where the Holy Father goes to pray before an apostolic voyage, and Cardinal James Michael Hervey, Archpriest of the Papal Basilica of St. Paul outside the wall, who will chair the ceremony in the same church. The closing of the holy doors happened in 2 stages. The true closing rite itself and then walling up of the holy door in all 4 basilicas a few weeks later. The rite in St. Peter Basilica consists in the Pope arriving at the holy door. He goes up the stair and silence, and then kneels in the doorway to pray. Once he gets up, the Holy Father closes the 2 sides of the door, and as he descends in front of the closed door, we hear the acclamation in song Christus Herie Hodie Finis et Principium, Christus Alpha Omega, Ipsi Gloria in Saecula. The song accompanies the path of the procession to the altar where Pope Francis will preside the Mass in St. Peter's Square. In all 4 papal basilicas in Rome, the rite also consists in the parchment reading on which is written the date of the official opening and the official closing of the door, as well as the signature of those present. The rite also includes placing coins in the urn. A gold one for the Pope, 4 silver coins for each year of the Pope's pontificate, and 15 bronze coins for each year since the last Jubilee, as well as placing the parchment itself. Then there will be the walling of the urn in the wall of the holy door and the reading of the deed certifying the masonry. On the bricks walled in the doorway there is an inscription in Latin with the Pope's name or of the delegate Cardinal who closed the door and the year of the Jubilee.
May we make God's merciful love ever more evident in our world through dialogue, mutual acceptance, and fraternal cooperation. Postage stamps. They have become of rare use to some of us and yet hold precious pieces of history. Such is the case for postage stamps issued by the Vatican. Vatican City started issuing them officially in 1929, once the territory was officially given its sovereignty after the Lateran Treaty between Italy and the Holy See, though papal stamps have been around since the mid-19th century. So under the treaty, Italy allowed Vatican State to continue operating with its own postal service, and papal mail was the most efficient mail system, so that during the Great Wars it became indispensable. The president of the Vatican Philatelic Society, Greg Pirozzi, told Catholic News Service how the papal stamps are closely linked to history and how the designs reflect very unique papacies.
Stamps are a reflection of the historical time period. During the papacy of John Paul II, where you had the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, many of the stamp designs reflected the commemoration of religious and historical aspects of those nations that were still subjugated by communism, Eastern Europe, the Baltics, Russia itself. And so those designs, the iconography and the issues themselves, again, are reflective of the time period in which they represent. Pope Benedict had a strong interest in German composers, and the Vatican for the first time issued stamps picturing the German composers. So it wasn't a surprise to see those issues. Francis is interesting. I think historically most or the majority of the designers of Vatican stamps were Italian, and Francis has really expanded that. So he has brought in artists from other nations, other cultures, and so as a result, you're seeing very different types of designs from that aspect alone. So I think it's an interesting, positive development from a design perspective.
If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them via Vatican Connections Twitter page at Vatican Connections. I'll be happy to answer them on our next episode. That's all for tonight. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.